Certainly China is not unique, but it's different in the context of, say, Switzerland or the US or the EU. And the criticisms in the past may have been seen as being unfair, but now they're not only just absolutely accurate, they're also accepted locally. And I think this is the big change, and you can see this certainly in the recent government kind of proclamations, is that there needs to be a war on pollution. So they've finally seen that the problems themselves can no longer be ignored. They're too big, they're growing too fast, and if they don't stop something, it'll come to scale in a way that threatens the economy. So I'd say for the average person on the street, we're talking about clean air, clean water, clean food, access to healthcare, access to education. It's not global warming, it's not climate change, and it's not carbon. It's about the personal, tangible relationship between the person, the economy, environment, and society. It's sustainability, but personal. Unlike, say, a government consideration, which may be more intergovernmental, which may be more about NGOs, civil society, and those more intangible emotional terms, for the average individual in China, and what's creating this bottom-up effect is the fact that the intangible movement is not pushing people, governments, to make changes. It's the bottom-up effect that's really personal, tangible, now becoming to the government itself. I would say if you look at your average Shanghai resident, particularly those with children, young families, or aspire to have a family, these issues are front and center for many of them. They're worried about food quality, they're worried about air quality, they're worried about the elderly care for their families, but they're also worried about access to healthcare and education for themselves. And I would say it's not only increasing their concerns, it's increasing their willingness to be engaged in the topics and the discussion itself. And so what we saw with, say, KFC and some of the other examples of food, but also of air quality, they're not just saying, okay, this is a problem. They're now starting to select, should we eat KFC or not eat KFC? Should we live in Shanghai and not live in Shanghai? You know, it's not just a government concern anymore. It's now a business concern when it comes to consumers. So the main obstacles is it's both economic, but it's also environmental and social. And I'll talk about the economics because at the end of the day, China's economy needs to continue growing for social stability to be maintained. So there's this balance between environment, economy, and social concerns. The government is going to continue to focus on maintaining the economy first. And what we're talking about for them to really overcome the barriers of the environment is to clean up the economy, to move away from manufacturing into service. And that's not just a decision you can make overnight. As well as, say, with the externalities of the economy, the dirty air, the dirty water, the product safety, food supply chain issues. You can't just clean that up overnight either. You need to invest in equipment, whether it be cameras and sensors, but you also need to invest in the people who are going to be enforcing regulations. You also need to be investing in the legal process. So there's a lot of investments that need to be made that, irrespective of whether or not we all agree that change needs to happen, for that change to actually take place, these steps need to be taken. And I think we're at the beginning, maybe the early middle phases of those steps, with many yet left to go. Well, I'd say that there's been nothing that's actually proven to be 100% effective yet. You can look at the air quality issues, and China released a network of publicly available monitoring stations where any individual can basically go online and see what the air quality is across the country. That was a very effective engagement mechanism that is essentially going to force the cities themselves to clean up because it introduced transparency and accountability. Now, the smog obviously hasn't been fixed yet, but that was a great first step for that. And that would be an example of where you see the government really opening up to this idea of transparency and accountability leads to a solution. We're seeing when it comes to the international side of this, and the ability for multinationals, multilateral NGOs, and governments to get engaged, is that China has now recognized the size of the problem, and they're understanding that they need specific technical assistance in many areas. They don't need to be lectured. They need true solutions. And if you can provide that water solution like GE, or pork traceability solution like IBM, you're going to find that the government will willingly want to engage and support those pilots. When it goes to scale, that's a different concern, obviously, but at least in the pilot phase, when they're looking for solutions, they are certainly willing to reach out to international providers for that. But again, they're not willing to be just lectured anymore. Well, China still has a lot of room to grow for the next 15 years. We're looking at doubling the size of the GDP in real terms. We're looking at 300 million more people in the urban setting, which means that their footprint as an economy is going to grow dramatically. 400% more energy than today, 200 to 300 million more cars than today. So the risk is that if business as usual does not change, that the size of the problems that we're currently seeing grow, that the scale of those problems grow. But this is where the opportunity is. We're going to see where markets around cleaning the air, water, and food become very legitimate, economically profitable markets. And so the concern is, if they don't make any real change over the next 5 to 10 years, that the problems get worse. But if they do, that actually be able to stabilize and make the improvements that almost every other country has made to this point, the US, EU, Japan. We've seen a really dramatic change in the last 10 years in how the government itself has taken this publicly. There used to be resistance to talking about these issues, and now it's open for discussion on almost every medium, be it social media, traditional media, or in the state council itself. There's a real culture shift that we see. The question is whether or not to be able to carry out and enforce all the regulations and all the steps that need to be taken. Right? Like, that's the big question going forward.